So we went there in hopes of making cast. And when we first walked up, I asked, well, I woke him up first and then asked him if we could make cast. And the young Navajo gentleman said, no, it's against their laws. And they could get fined or arrested if they let us. And they said that people used to make casts in the past, but they damaged them. So you can't make casts. Well, we came prepared for that. So we made a lot of measurements. We measured even distances between prints, which for the large tracks would be about 4 feet. You're talking 100 to 120 centimeters is what they would be. And we measured, the various ones. And we also looked at their directions. And what you find is that you get the tracks are in all different directions. They promote it as a migration, but these are moving in every possible direction. And it's not
Which
just
one?
that, okay, large ones are going in one direction, small ones going in the other. No, they're going all over the place, as you can see. You can see this is a medium-sized one right in here that's going off at an angle. They're just all directions. And like I said, we found a wide variety of track shapes, track sizes. We measured the depth of these. Oftentimes, the toes would be the deepest part, and which is often an indication that they were in water and they're trying to grip and push off the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so it was just quite interesting. But what was also interesting was the day before we went hiking right there in the area, and we were hiking through a wash that the day before that had received rains. And so that morning we had a guy that passed us up, and we could follow him because we could follow him every time he went across the wash because of his tracks in the mud. But later on that morning, by the time we're coming out, this is a desert environment. It's already dried up and you're not leaving tracks. You could walk right across that. So, I think that's pretty typical. How do you get these tracks to form? They have to be made in fresh, wet sediment before it dries, and then it has to be covered up without washing away and without rains on it. And so all that has to happen over a very short period of time. So all these tracks have to be laid down over a very short period of time. And by the way, this limestone, they say they find ammonites and other of the sea creatures in this same layer with the tracks. So this is just our observations, that it's a mixture of shapes and sizes. So it's a mixture of different types of creatures, and they're going in different directions. They're not migrating, and their toes are often deeper than the pad. So to me, it's a clear indication it's not a mass migration, but a mass escape during a flood is what it looks like to me. But as I said, we had a great time. It was really good. It was interesting, but we didn't make any cast. And the next day, we went on and did our hiking, seeing some beautiful, incredible places, the Antelope Slot Canyon. And I'll just say that the next day after that, we were to leave the area, having not made any cast. And overnight, I just kept being woken up saying, go back, go back. Well, the next morning when we got up, I asked my wife, and we had two ladies from our church that were with us, and they were like, yeah, you feel like God's saying we need to go back, let's go back. And I can tell you, one of the ladies in our group did not want to go back because it really disturbed her to see just how poor the Navajos are. It just kind of broke her heart. So we drove back, and we left the two ladies in our RV. Ruby and I got in the Jeep, and we started driving around, and we found a man there. And we asked him, well, first we found a lady, and she looked pretty respectable. And we asked her, hey, do you know a place where we can make tracks? And she said, come talk to my brother. So we went over there, and I told him, I'm a retired scientist. I work with creation research. I'd like to make tracks. And he says, no, that's against the law. And then he stopped and he says, but I know a secret place. So we followed him. And we followed him for about 40 minutes. He took us way off. I have no idea where we were at, but we were a long ways away. And he took us to a place, and it was actually up on this rise. Now, down here in the bottom looks to me to be the same formation in the same layer that the previous tracks were in, even though that was miles away. But he took us up on that rise, and there were 3 tracks, really nice tracks in a row. So we picked out one, and we made our cast. Now, I put some plastic down because he was very concerned about us destroying it. So I put plastic down. I didn't know how that was going to turn out. But while it was drying, I just turned and asked him, I said, can I ask you a personal question? And he says, yes. And I said, do you know who Jesus Christ is? And he says, yes, he's my Lord and Savior. And then he tells us that the lady we met, she leads their Bible study. I just found it interesting that God had a plan, and he sent us to find 2 Navajos who were Christians and sent us back there to ask them if we could make tracks. And he knew a place where we wouldn't get in trouble. So it's just interesting how God works. So we took these back. We had to remove the plastic, and then it left some little rivets in it, but we just took a little plaster and just smoothed it out. Just took a little water and smoothed it out. And we have some nice casts that now Joe's going to show us how to make casts from. Before I go on, this kind of comes up. This place isn't unusual. There are these dinosaur tracks all over the USA, and they pretty much cover all the USA from the Northeast all the way up to Alaska. There are many, many of these locations, and some of them are the same way. This is the famous one in Glen Rose, Texas. You've got tracks going that way and tracks going this way. This is in New Mexico. This is up in Connecticut. Tracks going in all different directions. Here, this one's in Colorado. So this isn't some unusual formation. This is a common formation. And Joe, y'all may want to talk some more about that. But just to conclude, finish up with what I saw, I'm wondering, how do you explain the dinosaur tracks when there's locations all over the world, each with hundreds to thousands of tracks, and the tracks are going in all directions, and they're typically laid down in an ocean sediment, and then they're covered by laterally flowing sediment. Are we producing these types of geologic features today? I don't think so.
So a couple of quick comments just from me, and then third open to the rest of the team. The point that Glenn made at the end is a really important one, right? We are dealing with tracks that are found not just in one location, but across basically continental North America, right? You can trace them all the way up into Canada. You can trace them up into Alaska, down into South America as well. There's famous ones in Patagonia and the place like, right? You can come over to the UK. There are over 400 known dinosaur track sites just in the UK, and we're a very small countries, very small island, one of the most studied geologically in the world, but that's partly why so many have been uncovered, right, and found, and new ones are being uncovered and found all the time. You can do the same across France, right? In fact, I've got some dinosaur footprints from France just over there to see if I can angle it right. Anyway, I'll pull some of them over in a minute while the others are talking, but you can trace these footprints across the entire world, and they're in the same major layers, right? So rather than it being just a small deposit or a small local flood or a small catastrophic deposit like you see in some things, you are dealing with a deposit that covers most of the world. So the Jurassic goes across the world, the Cretaceous goes across the world, the Triassic goes across the world, and it's the same major sequences that that you find in the USA and Canada, in the UK, and on, right? So you can come to the Jurassic Coast. It's the famous Jurassic Coast. You find dinosaur footprints in the Jurassic Coast. You find dinosaur footprints in the Jurassic rocks in the UK, just like the ones that you find over in the USA and over in Australia, right? You can go to Cretaceous deposits, and it's exactly the same story. So you're not just dealing with a small localized catastrophe or a small localized flood, because if you go to places like, and explore places like Winton, where Craig was showing, right, the evidence of a flooding environment is very clear. It's the same as the one that Glenn was looking at, right, with the ammonites. Whenever you have deep sea creatures and land animals buried together, you have evidence of a flood. But when you find them in the same rock layers, evidence of a flood, and this flood going around the world, you're looking at a much, much bigger flood than a local flood. You're looking at a much, much bigger catastrophe than a localized catastrophe. You're looking at a global flood. So don't be surprised that the evidence, as recorded in the scriptures of a global flood, really is very strong when you get out into the real world and actually do some digging. Okay, so moving on from that then, has anybody else got any comments and stuff before I talk about perhaps some casting sort of techniques, and perhaps we have some questions?
Well, I guess one of the comments we could make is that there are some other tracks of other animals that are found as well. It's not just dinosaurs that are found around the place. That they're the popular ones, the ones that people want to cut up and move to museums and things like that. But we do find some others, and there's one really well-known one that where they found a bird that's supposed to be found in rocks 60 million years before birds were about. So that's really thrown some confusion into the mix. And in fact, the writer of the article says that it could rewrite evolution.
Yeah. And we find them in Tennessee. Now, I haven't found any, but I keep having people come up to me telling me, oh, yes, we've seen the tracks in the limestone in the bottom of the creeks. And I do have one sample from a little bit further west from here at Carthage in the limestone that John collected, which looks like bird tracks to me. And who knows exactly what it is. But we do find these tracks in this area as well.
Geologists found ancient bird footprints at 60 million years too early. Some Popular Mechanics, an article in Popular Mechanics.
It's a bit like, and I can't remember the details, but I remember it was something like they found beehives like 40 million years before flowers had evolved, supposedly. And so it's a bit like, what were the bees surviving on for 30, 40 million years before? Yeah. Anyway,
dinosaur dung or something.
Probably, yeah.